Happy New Year. Hope you all had a great day or great night last night. And hopefully you're watching this video with a clear head and not aching and feeling like you're ever closer to the sweet embrace of death. 2025 is a new year, new start for all of us, and I think we should all embrace that as best we can and hope to make the best of it. 365 days to go in this year. Best not waste any of them. I'm back in the swing of it now, and this was a game I did not want to have to be my first one covering. 2024 was hard enough. Let's not have 2025 get even worse. Manchester United losing 2-0 at home to Newcastle United, and an injury 2-0 flatters Man United quite a bit. Newcastle, especially in that first half an hour, were all over them, dominated them, pressed them, just showed a lot more intensity and aggression and just quality as well. I think that's most important. And United dropping down to 14th. Look, they're not in a relegation battle, but the fact that that's a conversation you can realistically have is worrying. It's very worrying for Manchester United. And I do feel a great deal of sympathy for Amram. I kind of like what he's doing in the sense that he's sticking to his principles no matter what, which he should do because he's been hired for his qualities. So the idea he should adapt and change his style didn't work out well for Ten Hag, did it? That left him further along down the road than he should have been in his 3 years because he conformed to what that team needed at the time instead of going through the hard periods and battling through. Amram is battling through, and at the minute it's pain, and at the minute it's a lot of pain because this Manchester United team are bang average, and that is being very generous, by the way. A bang average group of players. So I'm not saying he's faultless at Amram at all. It's important not to make excuses where it becomes a bit silly. He's made errors, of course he is. He's a new manager. He's going to make mistakes. But Newcastle just caused them to capitulate and took advantage of them properly. And we're going to go over the Manchester United attacking shape first and how Newcastle beat them on that front. Now, there was a slight variation to the way Manchester United built up. Usually, under Amram, they'll have Maguire or whoever the central centre-back is inverting into midfield alongside Casemiro or whoever the deeper midfielder is. He didn't so much this game, and when he wasn't going long from goal kicks, Onana, and he was trying to play it out through the back, it would be with a bit more of a flat back three where he would partake within. He would make it a back four, a back five essentially, because Mazraoui wouldn't push up as high as Dalot on the right wing back position. Dalot was the source of width on the left hand side with Joshua Zirkzee coming inside. Eriksen and Casemiro played as the double pivots in this formation, so it was a little bit more orthodox, a little bit more, I would say, natural to what you see in football. Newcastle pressed high, they were aggressive. It was Isak coming up to Harry Maguire, Guimaraes pressing up into Lisandro Martinez, who came into more of a left-back role in these deeper areas, Anthony Gordon going on to De Ligt, Joel Linton and Tonali pressing up into Eriksen and Casemiro. Cher would be more focused on Rasmus Højlund, Trippier coming inside to Joshua Zirkzee, Jacob Murphy looking after Dalot, dropping back into the defensive line to cover Dalot's forward runs and his forward movements with Hall and Diallo. Now, this did leave Dan Burn as a +1 and Mazraoui as a spare man for Manchester United, but Newcastle adapted this well. So as you can see here, United couldn't play through the left-hand side. There were times where maybe if Isak got caught coming over to Onana from Maguire, Onana could slip that pass through there. Or there was the odd time when the ball was played forward to Rasmus Højlund, he could hold the ball up, try and find others and get them into play. Didn't work all the time. In fact, it didn't work a lot, but that was an option. So it was very hard for United to play through that left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, it was somehow even harder despite having the temporarily free man. So let's say if Onana, who wouldn't go straight to Mazraoui, he would go to De Ligt first, if Gordon had maybe dropped off and just allowed him a little bit more space. Then you get Lewis Hall jumping up from Diallo to Mazraoui, and where Dan Burn was the +1, he would then move across to Diallo, so they'd go completely man-to-man if the ball went over to De Ligt, and that was their trigger to go full pelt. And even in those moments of quick transition, you look at them and think, well, you can still play through them in those movements because of how slowly Manchester United moved the ball and how quickly Newcastle press. It was painful. Eriksen and Casemiro didn't get on the ball anywhere near as much. To be fair, Joel Linton and Tonali pressed them excellently and they were fantastic in these areas. Zirkzee didn't drop off really at all in these areas. It was easy for Trippier to sort of stay within the defensive line and just keep Zirkzee well tracked. He was pretty static in his movement. And it meant that when Newcastle won the ball back in these positions, because of the way that United shaped up, Eriksen and Casemiro essentially had the entirety of the middle of the pitch to have to try and defend. And you know, what more can I say that hasn't been said about them? They're not built to play in a midfield two together. They struggled even without having Bruno. When they had that with Mainu later on, when Mainu came into the team and was subbed on for Xerxes, they had that extra man that made it a lot easier for him. But as a midfield two, that you do have to pin at Amorim's doorstep because he got that one wrong. But United could get forward the odd time, and this is how they looked. When United pushed forward, it was in a 3-1-6. And I will give Amorim credit for this because a lot was made in the Monday Night Football that Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville did before the game about the lack of attacking quality that you get from Dallo and Mazraoui in wing backs. And while that is obviously true, I don't think enough credit was given to the fact that Mazraoui wasn't actually playing as an orthodox wing back in the sense that he was holding the width in the attacking sense. Diallo was still doing that. Diallo was the one that was holding the width, and Mazraoui would invert into this right half space. They have the pace in Diallo to attack that wide area. I don't think he does it enough. I think his form since the City game's been a bit fleeting. Mazraoui, who is a lot better coming in centrally than he is out wide. He doesn't have that high energy, high intensity running power in him to cover the width of the pitch like that. He's a lot better with the ball at his feet, technically in tight spaces and playing through. And so I think those two complement each other well. And there was a couple moments where, they did offer a bit of link up and they managed to get free to play the ball over to the far side. The only problem was, as you can see, Newcastle defended with a back five and they covered the width of the pitch really well. And they just made it harder for United to break them down. Casemiro was the sole pivot, who I just thought was atrocious with his passing, uh, giving the ball away, pointless little uh, attempts to play the ball over the top, and with no quality, no real thought or idea, just really, really poor. Martinez would come in a lot further alongside and try and play forward and try and get on the ball and create in these areas, and he had mixed success with it. It got better as the game went on. Dallo was the left wing back, again forcing Jacob Murphy further back, and so as a result, it made Bruno Guimaraes the outside right position in that midfield four. And if the ball went back to a Maguire, say from Casemiro, Isak would look to press while shadowing either the right centre back in Delit or the left centre back in Martinez, depending on where his angle was better suited. So if he would shadow the ball into Delit, forcing Maguire to go to Martinez, Guimaraes would come out to Martinez. If it was the other way and he was shadowing the pass to Martinez, Maguire would then have to play the ball into Delit, where Gordon would come out and press. So when Newcastle needed to, they engaged, they were physical, they were aggressive, and they understood their roles completely. And as much as they do give you space, Newcastle, in between their defence and midfield, the positioning and the rigidity from Xerxes, Ericsson, and Mazraoui was really poor. Xerxes was staying so close to Trippier, so close to that defensive line that you just couldn't really impact the game in any way. It wasn't providing any angles for Martinez or Casemiro or whoever to play to from these areas. And I don't want to harp on Xerxes because, look, he got the embarrassment of getting subbed off before half time. And I don't want to pile on him or anything, but I'm going to say a couple of things. One, I think the criticism of the fans are really, really poor from a lot of people. A lot of United fan channels, by the way, Adam McCullough, Steve Howson. I think it's brutal that they're having a go at fans for booing Xerxes getting booed off the pitch. A fan who's paying a lot more money, thanks to the way that Ineos are running the club, than they ever should for a lower quality of football, can't boo a player who's been, let's be honest, really poor since he's come to United. Really, really poor, and he had expectation. You do that as a fan when you're in the stadium. You're not going to clap him. You're not going to applaud him. You voice your discontent. You voice your frustration with a player that just hasn't been good enough, and that's it. It's not abuse. It's not crossing the line. If they were shouting abuse at him outside of the stadium, which has happened, I would completely agree. That's unacceptable, and that's where a line needs to be drawn. I didn't think the fan reaction crossed the line. I thought it was a reaction to a player who's been really poor for Manchester United. Xerxes isn't the sole problem. He's not even the biggest problem. He's probably not even in the top 10 or 15. But he's been really poor, and that fans are allowed to voice their frustration at that. So I just think it's really hypocritical from some of these fan camps that have profited off of serious abuse going to certain players to then have the audacity to describe fans booing and cheering a player getting subbed off as abuse. I think it's so hypocritical. And on the odd time where the ball would come to an Ericsson or would come to a Mazraoui in these situations, Byrne and Cher would read these situations really well. And if they felt like they had the freedom to, they'd go and press, they'd go and be aggressive while the other looked after Højlund. And so they did their business really well in these situations. Newcastle, they defended excellently, as say Murphy, creating the back five, watching Dallo, who again, isn't made for the left wing back position. Any chance he gets, he cuts back into his right foot and slows the attack down. Apart from one opportunity in the second half where I think it even conned Murphy a bit. I think it even shocked Murphy that he went back onto his left foot and put a ball in, and it was a half decent quality of ball. It's weird. It's almost as if he could have been doing that the entire time. Improved a little bit when Mainu came on for Xerxes, and he was operating either in the double pivot with Casemiro, which also allowed Martinez to move a lot more forward and get his range a lot better playing forward, or Mainu would move himself into that attacking midfield area. It did improve United. It has to be said, it did improve their quality, and with the extra level of mobility and energy in that attacking area, it meant that Højlund had a bit more space to manoeuvre in that attacking area of the pitch, whereas Xerxes' positioning kept that right side of the Newcastle defence pretty comfortable, and it restricted space Højlund could move into. With Mainu on the pitch, it gave him a little bit more freedom, and he was finding angles to make movements and behind, receiving it from the likes of Martinez, who has the better quality from those United players from deep, to make runs and then find the pass. And so there was a lot more quality. It just didn't result in a goal. A couple better chances, but by that point, Newcastle were fairly comfortable and they were happy dropping off and just sustaining a little bit more pressure. And they saw the job out and earned their clean sheet fantastically. But how did Newcastle attack the game? We'll go over that now. Newcastle built up in their 2-3-2-3 with Tonali playing as the single pivot, as he has done in recent weeks. In between Trippier and Hall, Joe Linton and Guimaraes high up in the 8, Murphy and Gordon out wide with Isak up top, and United would start off in a sort of 5-2-3, which didn't help out Eriksen and Casemiro at all. It gave them a lot of space to have to deal with in a horizontal sense against again, what I've described so far and what I will keep describing as a physically dominant Newcastle midfield. Højlund would start on Tonali, but would then go to press the centre-back on the ball, of leaving Tonali free, but trying to shadow the run into him. Xerxes and Diallo would start on the fullbacks, but let's just say if it went to share, Xerxes would keep an eye on Trippier, Diallo would come into Dan Burn, and it would try and close Newcastle into this area of the pitch, and vice versa if it went to Dan Burn. Højlund would press him, with Diallo staying on Hall, and Xerxes would come into Fabian Schär. Now, this would obviously leave Tonali free for Schär to find the pass into, and United did try and combat this with, when this pass went forward, either Eriksen or Casemiro, depending on who was in the better position, would move up to press. Now, this would obviously leave their man free, which would then cause the wide centre-backs to have to react. Now, if it was in Newcastle's right-hand 8 position, Lisandro Martinez would engage from the defensive line to close down Guimaraes. Now, if it was in the left-sided 8 position, you get De Ligt doing it. This issue, I think, lies with the majority of the United players. You could argue that this is asking a lot from a fitness and energy point of view from a team that don't have the physical and energetic capabilities to pull this off from amateurs. So you can describe this as an issue, but I don't think this is too much to ask. This is a clear trigger, a sign of when to go, and I think the wide centre-backs in United's defensive stage have been consistently awful since Amorim has taken charge. Dreadful. The way they go to press the players in these half space, which is so important to do when you have a midfield too. These guys need to be ready to aggress, they need to be ready to go and press and close up these areas and offer a bit of numerical support to the midfield too to stop them from getting overrun and overwhelmed. They've been consistently, no matter who's played in those positions, dreadful. So bad. And again, the quickness in the press, which is just something United do not have. So let's just say if Højlund goes into press, the time it takes from either Eriksen or Casemiro to then get into their player on the ball is so poor. The reactions then of De Ligt and Martinez were dreadful. De Ligt much worse, I have to say. Martinez, we know, is a front foot aggressive defender, so unless it was a sudden reading of a situation, he struggled. But when there was a clear sign of him going up to press Guimaraes or whoever, he would do, and he'd stick to his man tight. De Ligt's ambling forward to close the man down, I thought was dreadful. He's a player that gets defended by United fans a lot. I don't see it. I really don't see it. That's just me being completely honest. And so those moments of United players reacting and pressing forward just caught them so much. And at points where they wouldn't go and engage the wide centre-backs, they just completely drop off. And the player in the attacking position would get time and space to turn and play forward. And Eriksen and Casemiro against these three were on an island. And the recovery of the likes of Diallo, not so much. I'm going to give him a bit of a blight because I think he really struggled with these circumstances. But Xerxes, again, may have contributed to him going off, and they got no protection from those wide areas, really, and the wide centre back. So, as bad as Eriksen and Casemiro were off the ball, that shouldn't shock you. Offer them protection from somewhere. The wing backs can't join in because they're getting pinned back by the wingers. But the wide centre backs didn't do enough, and the wide players didn't do enough to support these two who were always going to struggle. You had to see that coming. And so that when Newcastle moved into their second phase of build up and you had that 3-on-2, and Hall would then start to move forward because he would be the more attacking fullback. It would allow Anthony Gordon to move in a lot more centrally. This then, as Newcastle would typically favour the right-hand side of build-up, and Jamie Carragher pointed this out in half-time, how narrow United were. And that is because of Gordon coming in, forcing Mazraoui in more narrow, De Ligt coming in a lot more narrow, Maguire into this area here, Martinez coming across, Dallas obviously more concerned with Jacob Murphy, forced them over onto that side of the pitch. Eriksen and Casemiro had to try and restrict the space as much as possible against the midfield they were dealing with. Diallo would then have to come back potentially from Dan Burn to track Lewis Hall, but then he would also come back into the midfield area. And I don't know if this was instruction. This didn't feel like an instruction. This felt like a situation where he saw danger, but almost was caught in tracking his man and coming inside. And he ended up doing a little bit of neither. He would come inside to try and take care of any extra man that Casemiro and Eriksen were dealing with, and didn't really close the space off well enough at all, as I said, because of that maybe that hesitancy. Trippier and then Livramento would tuck in to form the back three a little bit more. So Xerxes almost ended up into a front two really with Højlund. Whether that was because he was more concerned with Trippier or he just couldn't get back in quick enough. It was really poor defensive work from him, and again may have contributed to him getting off the pitch. And so as a result, this midfield three for Newcastle found it very easy to play around United in the midfield. It was almost too easy at points, just completely got through. And at points they would go from a midfield three with a single pivot to a double pivot. If Bruno Guimaraes dropped in alongside Tonali, Joel Linton could move up into a sort of more centre forward position. And this would then allow Isaac to search for the ball a little bit here. And he was very clever with his positioning, Joel Linton. I think he would sometimes play in that central area to occupy Harry Maguire, so that Harry Maguire would then let Isaac run off into this position. And Martinez and De Ligt never really felt comfortable with engaging with Isaac in this position, whether it was because it wasn't an assigned marker, whether it was a lack of confidence in dealing with his explosiveness, because, he has a lot of quality, Isaac. He taught Van Dijk to shreds dropping into these positions a couple of weeks ago, so he's obviously fantastic at it. But he was searching for the ball here and was able to link up with the deeper midfield too, with Joel Linton offering a bit of a decoy at points and contributed to that midfield overload and quality. Xerxes not dropping in, and so typically found himself pulling out into this right half space a lot. Then play the ball back to Guimaraes to Tonali, who could then look for the run of either Gordon if he pulled off of Mazraoui into this area, or to the overlapping run of Lewis Hall, who again, Diallo would end up leaving a lot of space between them. So Hall would then come across, Mazraoui would then have to cover across, potentially leaving Gordon free. De Ligt would then have to cover across Maguire and Lisandro Martinez for Lewis Hall or Anthony Gordon, depending on who found themselves in the wide areas. And they didn't react well enough to these situations. Mazraoui, it's come from two crosses on his side, which he hasn't closed down the crosser. I was going to say well enough. He hasn't closed them down at all. Lisandro Martinez just not being able to track a runner to save his life in these situations. It cost United 2 goals. I know the second one was a bit controversial because it looked like there was a handball in there. In the second half, when they made substitutions and Kobbie Mainoo came on and Eriksen moved into that left half space position, and let's just say that Joshua Xerxes is playing the role of Mainoo right now. They did drop off into that 5-4-1, offered the two central midfielders a little bit more protection. And again, Newcastle found it a lot harder to get as much joy in the midfield area because they had a bit of a midfield to have to deal with. There was a lot more restricted space. And United were a lot more compact horizontally and vertically. And the balance just seemed to suit United a lot more in that situation. But by that point, the game was done and they'd already been carved open through their defensive naivety, lack of legs, lack of energy, and lack of real planning around what were clearly going to be weaknesses within the squad, and clearly things that Newcastle have all the quality in the world to exploit. And full credit to Newcastle, they're climbing the table, consistently performing above expectation with Eddie Howe, and you can't fault for it. But United, Anfield away on Sunday. Happy New Year. Nothing's really changed. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it. Comment down below, tell me why either way. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time. In a bit, lads.